Okay. So probably people will come in during the meeting, and that's okay. So there'll be just know there'll be probably some back and forth and things being a little disrupted. That's the way it is.
Okay.
Anyway, welcome to everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming by. This is Hugh Live. It's FIT's new webcast series. This is a collection of intimate conversations with really interesting and important people in fashion, business, and the creative fields, most of whom happen to be FIT alumni. I am Alex Joseph. I'm the chief storyteller for FIT, and I'm also one of the editors of Hugh Magazine, FIT's magazine, for which these talks are named. And I am also an alumnus of the college with a degree known as the Master's in Fashion and Textile Studies, History, Theory, Museum Practice, class of 2015. So we started Hugh Live earlier this year. In this unprecedented moment of human history, it seemed like a good idea for us to all gather together, all the people in our extended community, and talk and listen to what they had to say. But we are always interested in hearing your thoughts and suggestions for Hugh Live. So if you have an idea for a subject, or if you have a person you'd like to hear speak, please reach out to me. Let me know. My email address is also in the chat if you look up. So here's how it's going to go. I'll talk to Sam Kalda for about 35 minutes or so. And then we will open it up to the audience. So if you all have questions, you can put those questions in the chat, and we will get to as many of these questions as we can. Remember that if you're going to do something about this event on your social media, to tag hashtag FIT alumni in your posts. So last thing, I'm going to be taping this event, so you are not anonymous. If you say something, you may be recorded, or if you type something in, those messages will also be recorded. Fair enough. Okay, so tonight our guest is Sam Kalda, who has an MFA in illustration from FIT, class of 2014. Sam won a gold medal in book illustration from the Society of Illustrators in 2017. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the New Yorker, Buzzfeed, and many other publications. His illustrated books include When Darwin Sailed the Sea, 2020, from Wide-Eyed Press, and When We Walked on the Moon, from 2019, also Wide-Eyed Press, written with David Long, as well as Of Cats and Men, History's Great Cat-Loving Artists, Writers, Thinkers, and Statesmen, which came out in 2017 from 10-Speed Press. Now, as I said before, over the summer, Sam wrote and illustrated a story for the new digital-only edition of Hugh. So, if you've just arrived into the room and you haven't seen it, do click on that link and check it out. So, Sam, you won the Society of Illustrators Award for Of Cats and Men, right?
Yeah, it was in the book category at the Society of Illustrators. So, but it was for a particular illustration in it. It was for the final spread of the book.
Oh, what's going on in that spread?
Well, I figured you would ask questions, and honestly, it's been so long since I've actually looked through my own book that I thought I would bring it along. But this was the final piece. You could see. So this was the piece that was that won the gold there.
Oh, okay. And who are the people? I'm sorry. Who are the people in that illustration? Sorry.
So there's no one. It's not anyone in particular. Really, it's the last page of the book, and it's really about this idea of like connecting between past and present. So you have a monk working on a manuscript, like a vellum manuscript on one side, and connecting with a painter, working in present day New York. So
now, Now, I read that you started this book in part because you felt that men were usually represented with dogs. Is that true?
I mean, sort of. I mean, this stemmed from a project really that was initiated while I was in the MFA program in a class. And so that was definitely part of it. On a basic level, you know, I had been collecting photos, just like inspirational, like photos for a long time. And some of it were like black and white photos of like Jean Cocteau and his cats, Edward Gorey and Marlon Brando. And I just, you know, was sort of interested in this idea of a collection of these cat-loving men. And I think it also, yeah, stemmed from the fact that it's, you know, it's bizarre to me that animals are so gendered anyways, that yeah, was sort of a playful, I guess, pushback on that idea.
And I'm kind of curious about a couple things. One is, I know you drew Haruki Murakami, who was a famous cat-loving Japanese sort of cult author. Is that okay to describe him that way?
Yeah, I mean, people, yeah, I feel like certain friends of mine really started recommending I check out, you know, his books. But I would say, yeah, he has a definite following.
You said in one interview that you were going through a major Murakami phase. So which of his books is your favorite and why?
So you know, I haven't read a huge amount of Murakami. I have to say I loved IQ 84. Is it 1Q84? 1Q84. And that one, and you know, I think the first book I read of his that I was sort of drawn to was Kafka on the Shore, and the whole idea of someone kind of being ending up in a library and hiding out and living in a library that's very remote and reading all day. There's something still about that book that sticks with me, you know. And I remember distinctly reading one night, and there's this character, Johnny Walker, who is a cat killer. And it's so vividly horrible, the descriptions of it. I remember putting the book down and grabbing my cat and being like, I just got to take a break. Really. But yeah, yeah, I think that book probably was the one that drew me into kind of, you know, Murakami's universe, which it is a universe of kind of similar motifs and whatnot.
The very, very strange, like mysterious kind of stories, and even as you're reading them, you're sort of not sure what's real, what's fantasy. There's a sort of the other related question, as is maybe related, certainly it's related to the book, is cats. You have drawn you did a whole book about men and cats, and actually you've now done 2 features for Hugh, and both times you drew cats. And you kind of got a reputation among the Hugh staff for being the person who draws these fantastic cats. Right. So what is that? Like, first of all, how do you draw a great cat? Like, what's the secret?
I don't really, I don't know if I have really great advice for that. I think why, you know, with this new one, when you approached me about it specifically, I think was asked to include cats in it. So that was part of it for sure. But I don't know. I think it's also a weird device that, I mean, my work takes inspiration from my house and the things around me in a very direct way. And, you know, there's a lot of similar motifs that occur in the interiors of my illustrations that are just in my regular life, and cats are part of that. You know, this idea of like paint what you know. you know, when you're working all day and there's cats crawling around your desk and sleeping everywhere, it bleeds into the work a little bit.
One of the editors, when you submitted one of your first drawings for this feature, took one look at it and said, "Those are real cats. I know those are true cats."
Right.
So maybe you need to do a total cat book. Maybe it just needs to be like cats all the time. Okay. I'm not your agent, so I'm not going to.
Okay. All right. I will take that into consideration. I have a filing cabinet here, and I will put it in.
So I know you went to SUNY Purchase for your BFA before you came to FIT, but you did not grow up in New York. So tell us about tell us a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up? You grew up in Sioux Falls. Was it Sioux Falls?
I grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Okay. So it's the largest city in the state of South Dakota. It's about a quarter of the population of a very small state that lives there. So I grew up there. I spent about not quite a year when I was about 5. I lived with my family in Perth, Australia as well for, not quite a year. So, but up until I left for college, that's, I grew up there. And my childhood was, we always were doing, I feel like, craft projects and different sort of artistic projects. My parents both work in healthcare. And Sioux Falls is actually quite a magnet for regional healthcare, but both of them, like my mom quilts, needlepoints, my dad, does woodworking. He painted and was, he is a wood carver now. And so we grew up, I think, always with the idea that working with our hands, was a great, pastime, and having hobbies were really important. And my parents were very encouraging of creativity with all of us, not just with me. I did, when I was in high school, summer, my junior year, I did a summer program at SVA for high schoolers. And when it came to college, I really wanted a program that offered a liberal arts degree. And I think someone's audio is on.
Sorry, yes, sorry, Sam. Hi, please mute your mic if you can.
But it's a place that offered a liberal arts degree and also had a art college attached to it.
I see. Okay. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that, Sam.
Okay. So yeah, and I ended up at SUNY Purchase, and I was able to, study up there. And I went to the city basically whenever I could, and I would go to museums. And like everyone I went to college with, we moved to the city afterwards.
But did you have a moment with drawing though, where you first sort of had an experience where you drew something that was sort of a watershed or surprising moment for you?
I don't know if I had a definite moment. I think it was always the thing I was best at doing in class. And I, to be honest, was not a great student for years. I hated school, but I really loved drawing. And later on, I think in high school, I started taking school much more seriously. But that was kind of my escape, and I would draw comics, drew a lot of Batman characters from Batman the Animated Series. That was, I drew endless witches, wizards. And yeah, so that I would say maybe that and cats, witches, and Batman were probably my main subject matter.
So now I'm understanding where the cats come from. They come from the witches. So that's the connection.
Maybe partially, yeah. I went as a witch as a child for Halloween like 4 years in a row. So yeah, they kind of are entwined, I guess.
Did you have a tall, pointy hat?
I think I did. I think I had variations on it. You know, every year would, depending on what was available at the store, you know, but pretty traditional. I was a huge, which explains a lot, huge Wizard of Oz fan, and I just watch it endlessly. So very archetypal witch attire.
There you go. So like green skin.
Yeah, it's South Dakota though, and around Halloween it's normally snowing, so lots of paint is a little dodgy because you're pretty bundled up.
So how did I missed something because someone was making noise. How did you end up at SVA from Sioux Falls, South Dakota?
Well, there was a summer program for high school students that I attended that was in you know, it was mostly painting was the focus of it. And really that was, I think, the way most, you know, like friends of mine or like people I grew up with, like went to like sports camps or things like that, athletic stuff. You know, my hobby was always, and passion was always really drawing and painting, you know. And from there, we had gone to visit, you know, out to New York for a wedding, and my parents had been there a number of times. And after I went, you know, out there for a vacation, I was hooked, and you know, knew I eventually wanted to move there.
Interesting. So you went to SUNY Purchase, and then how did you go from the BF? It was a BFA in art. Is that what it was?
In painting. Yep.
Painting.
Painting.
What made you decide to go get your MFA?
So I had been out of college for a couple of years, and I worked in furniture stores. I had like a bunch of part-time jobs in like selling mid-century furniture in Brooklyn. And then I was working on a documentary with a friend of mine, just helping out, and really realized that I wanted to continue making art and really finding a way to create structure in my life to do that. So I started, you know, I was missing drawing, and I was particularly, I think, missing storytelling as part of it. And I, to be honest, I didn't know much about illustration. You know, my background in undergrad was a painting major, and a lot of my teachers were kind of 70s conceptualists. I was doing installations. It was very different. And I think I had a very sort of square idea about what illustration was. And, but, you know, in between my, my junior and senior year, I did a summer fellowship. And one of the visiting art faculty members at the end of it was, you know, I was making, you know, I was making drawings, and I was photographing them as like stage sets. And she came up to me and was like, I think you might be an illustrator. You know, I think your interests are more maybe with storytelling. And that kind of stuck with me as, you know, just something to think about, I suppose. And then, you know, then I discovered the program at FIT and applied.
Okay. And what did you have any particularly useful interactions there, either with faculty? Did you make friends who were helpful to you?
Yeah.
What happened?
I mean, I had a great experience. We had was a small program, and I, you know, some people had studied in their undergrad illustration. There were other people who had published children's picture books. Everyone had pretty different backgrounds. And, you know, for me, I think when Melanie admitted me, I kind of didn't know what to expect. I had, you know, and I'm thankful in a way, because I sort of hit the ground running with just kind of learning about this new field. And it was, my classmates and I got like very close, we would go like hang out after class at the Triple Crown on 7th. So yeah, it was, I had a good time. And, I worked full time while I was in school and started freelancing a little bit while I was in school too. So I kind of had no free time, but I was really happy just being busy, and yeah, and I was definitely much more organized, I think.
Okay. All right. What was it like to start selling your work? How did that happen? And what were the experiences like?
So in terms of being commissioned to do editorial and book stuff,
Yes.
I started sending out, I had like a group of drawings that for the first time resembled one another. And I deal with this now with students all the time, is like the idea of style and whatnot. And my work was all over the place. And so I started sending out emails to art directors at, alternative weeklies. And I got a job with the Chicago Reader after a couple months of doing that. And then I was so thrilled, it was like, it paid very little, but it was a great, experience. And then I got another job at Architect Magazine and slowly, started making work. And I'm grateful because a lot of that work, looking back on it, is not good. And I'm happy that people sort of, that I was able to get better at making artwork while learning how to freelance and kind of having these things grow together. I see what the kind of work students have at the Society of Illustrators show, the student shows, and it's mind-blowing. I was definitely not at that place. So yeah, that's, we had classes in contracts and, talking about legal stuff. And that really helped. The sort of business classes, I think, from the very beginning, I think gave me a sense of, a basic sense of how to navigate, or certainly know when to ask questions.
But say if there might be a student or students paying attention to this program. So like when you first started working with art directors, was it, I mean, obviously each one is slightly different, but did you have kind of key, experiences that kind of shaped what that was like? Were there, really, great art directors who were easy to work with, or more challenging ones? Like, what was it like to find your footing in that world? I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it still is, it always, with working with someone new is always unique at first, just trying to get a sense of how you email. I mean, I think it's so interesting meeting people in person and then knowing them, their email selves, and feeling like there's a big contrast and sort of temperament and warmth and whatnot. I think the initial art directors I worked with were really lovely. And especially in editorial, I think I've had pretty good luck working with people. I worked in customer service for a long time, and I sent like thousands of emails and dealt with bookkeeping stuff and having, I worked at the Noguchi Museum, so we would be ordering very expensive tables for people and dealing with customer service. And I felt, comfortable navigating some trickier situations, but especially in the beginning, it's very hard to know when to kind of put your foot down on certain things and when that's okay. And also accepting that, feedback is a part of the process. And I think, for the most part, it makes the work better, for sure.
Okay. Now, when we were trying to think about an illustrator for this particular feature for the magazine, and we didn't really have a great idea of what we wanted it to be, but we knew we wanted it to have a certain feel and a certain, and we just immediately thought of you because we understand your work has a certain quality, and I'm not going to define that quality. We'll just say it's a, there's something peaceful about it, perhaps. But can you talk a little bit about how you developed your style? How did you find your way into that? Because I feel like if we're going to hire Sam Kalda for something, we know we're going to get often a cat, but not always a cat. But even if it's like not a cat, we know the style. So can you talk about how you developed that? When did you start to do it? What was it like? Like what, how did you kind of go a light bulb going on moment? Like, oh, this is my style, or did it develop?
Yeah, yeah. So no, there was no light bulb moment. But I think this question comes up a lot, and it comes up a lot with students in particular. And, now that I teach as well, and I talk about this a lot with students, and in some ways, I kind of, when students get stressed out, and I know I was really stressed out on this idea of finding a style, it just happens, I think, organically to a certain extent. I think part of it is your style is informed, I think, by the necessity of deadlines, abbreviating things, in certain ways. It develops because of that. You have to know that you can accomplish a scene in 48 hours to meet a deadline. So what you leave out is as important as what you put in. I think another part of it is just really enjoying research, finding out what inspires you, artists, art movements you like, not just other illustrators. I think, being interested in a particular era of furniture design and, can be as important as knowing which contemporary illustrator you like. Because, I think ultimately what interests me about other illustrators or other artists is not so much style, it's a kind of sensibility where there's like a real world that they build. And so, I think for me, it's like I collect art books, I collect, kind of paper ephemera, old advertisements, old, issues of communication arts from the 60s. And when I'm working on a project and I feel stuck, it's like I kind of view my library as almost like like a musical collection, and think, okay, what is the feeling I want for this? And going from there. And I think when you find an artist you like, try to find the artist that inspired them. I think going further back along to a source is really important. So I hope that answers your question. It's not a cut and dry answer, I suppose.
Well, just wondering, like, what is the style of furniture that interests you?
No, I mean, like I said, after furniture plays a big role in my work because I just worked in furniture stores after college. I worked in a shop that sold, it was mid-century furniture and some antiques. Another place was a Scandinavian furniture shop. I worked at an Upper East Side antique company for a while, which is a horrible job. And then at the Noguchi Museum, which is mid-century inspired. So now, I live in an old house, and find myself drawn to like arts and crafts period, English arts and crafts. And, it's sort of all over the place. But what kind of furniture? Weirdly enough, I've been looking at a lot of William Morris, which is not necessarily something you could tell in my work, but I'm I'm interested in that movement.
Well, he's very humane, right? I mean, he's sort of reacting against technology.
Yes.
So to some extent, I can see that in your work. I think of you as very, the word isn't like sensitive, but humane, I think is a word I would use to characterize the things that you've drawn. Do you find that under the pandemic conditions that you're struggling to come up with ideas, or how do you get ideas now?
I don't think that's changed. I'm I'm just trying to keep it together, you know. um, uh, you know, I think right now, I'm not sleeping well, feeling like waves of anxiety, and I find I'm sort of very lucky right now to have a couple projects that are more long term that I've kind of been able to continue working on. Um, but I found I've gone back to painting quite a bit recently in my personal work. Just focusing on small, panel paintings, and just exploring right now and experimenting. And I spend so much time, like everyone else, on my phone, checking like 538, like doom scrolling, all of it. And I think painting right now, it's something very physical and tactile, and it kind of it interrupts that cycle a little bit. And I'll put on music or a podcast and just put my phone away, leave my computer in a different room, and just try to work on a small 12 by 16 rectangle and focus on that.
Just to be clear, is that smaller than you would usually work? Is the sizing helpful to be reduced in size?
No, I find actually very small paintings take as long as like a slightly bigger painting. It's like, it's a little bit fussier working that small. So, no, my issue is it's like, I still have to store these things, so they can't be that big, They have to go into a closet later, so they have to fit.
Unless someone buys them.
It's true. So if anyone's interested,
Sam, were you able to find a few images to share?
Yeah. So I basically I brought up a few projects just to show my process a little bit, taking an idea from a sketch to a final work. Research involved. And so I'm going to share my screen. Oh. Okay. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay, you should be able to share your screen. I set it that way. Okay. All right.
All right, can you see it right now? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see this, what I'm showing you?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I'll just present this. So I just, these are some sketches from of Cats and Men that I just wanted to show the process of. So this is Churchill. This was a little doodle on the left that I made in my sketchbook. I was on an airplane flying home from Christmas. And what I did is I, took a photo with my phone, when I got home, blew it up in Photoshop and started working on a refined sketch. And from there, what I will do sometimes, even though I paint digitally, is I will add in hand-drawn textures. And so this sheet right over here is all of the textures I made and I scanned in. And on the left here is just often what I'll do, especially if it's a portrait or if it's, like in the Darwin book where it's like a heavily researched project, is I'll make just a sheet of visual inspiration. So this was Churchill's desk. And so I took elements of that and brought it into the final artwork. And same here, this is Tsukuharu Fujita. Quick, sketch. I'm making notes about the colors I want in the background. And creating textures, and you can see how it's brought into the final. That you can, there again, see that just that process. you know, with this, I knew I wanted a molecular model. And so later I researched, I think it's the, you know, compound for catnip. And so that became this, you know, over here.
Very clever.
You know, this is my husband modeling with our cat, because I had to get Freddie Mercury's hands. You know, it's a weird thing to hold like a floppy cat body. So needed reference on that. Romare Bearden. Sometimes I'll go directly from a pencil sketch, but a lot of times my initial sketches are very, very loose. And then I brought it into a tonal sketch and then into the final. So this, I'm going to not share my screen and go back to the camera. But so the next project is a mural I did last year for Warby Parker. So you can see it, you know, in situ here, and here's the final artwork for it. But really, you know, that, let me go back here. Stop presenting. Okay. With that, you know, that just started out really as these, you know, small thumbnails, you know, and again, working very, very loosely. And I write notes as I'm doing it on different ideas or potentially different artists I'm interested in. One of them, I wanted sculptures in it, similar to Brancusi sculptures. And, you know, when I'm doing thumbnails like that, it really is, it's very loose. And I think of it more like just writing, you know, like just brainstorming and, you know, just kind of finding a composition that works. And, you know, my process has changed a little bit since I got an iPad. So now I will, once I have, like, for instance, this was a sketch I did for some West Elm mugs that that were released last year. So I'll take a photo with my phone of this and we'll, you know, put it, sometimes I'll take a photo with my iPad, blow it up in Procreate, because I feel like the composition in thumbnails tends to be more dynamic. And then I'll refine from there. And a couple more.
Sam, can I just ask a quick question here?
Yeah.
These are very commercial projects, West Elm and Warby Parker. They feel very different from editorial. Is the process, is the working process different for you, or is it very similar?
It's with both of them, it's like with West Elm, the prompt was, this is a fundraiser for the ASPCA. So I knew it was animal related. And then I was sort of open-ended at that point. With Warby Parker, they were like, we want you to do an interior scene. And they gave me a page of examples from my work that they liked, examples of my work. And those are harder in a way because it's a commission, but it's also kind of a personal work at the same time because you're just creating your content, you know, fresh for them. So that, you know, so to go back to it, it's slightly different than an editorial job where you're given a specific article or a prompt that, you know, and the dimensions for it, and you kind of work within those parameters. So both of these projects were fun because for being more akin to advertising or product design, I had a lot of freedom in that, which is not always the case.
Did they seek you out for these?
So for Warby Parker, yes, they were looking for an illustrator based in the Twin Cities, and it was through Instagram, I think.
Wow.
And then with West Elm, years ago, it was actually when it was my last year at FIT. I just you know, found, I think, the name of a mutual friend or who was a designer there at West Elm, like a packaging designer. And I knew they used illustration on some of their products. And so I emailed him some examples of my work. And, you know, mind you, I emailed so many, you know, hundreds of people. So it was a regular thing and mostly didn't hear back. But it just so happened at that time that they were looking to introduce some more illustrated product. So it was kind of the right timing. So I did a project with them 4 years ago, and they had this fundraiser thing that came up, and I had worked with them in the past.
Gotcha. No problem.
Yeah.
Keep going. You had other examples that you were going to share?
I did have one more, and you know, as I was saying before, I think I think that when you have a style and you're commissioned to make work, you can kind of get into a rut with it after a while. And making my own personal work is really important. And having a separate studio practice as a place to explore different ideas and experiment has, you know, it keeps my editorial practice, I think, lively, or, you know, it refreshes it in some way for me. So this was, you know, like last winter, I was just sketching, you know, in my living room, just a scene. And as much as I use my iPad for things, a lot of what I do just requires tracing paper. Yeah. So once I have a very, you know, kind of fairly tight, but still somewhat loose drawing, you know, just bring tracing paper directly over it and refine the sketch. This is so funny. I'm showing points this way. And, you know, pretty analog. And what I'll do is scan this in and I'll blow it up. And I wanted to play with more watercolors. So I blew it up in Photoshop, printed it out, tiled it together, and then with that printout, turned it around and rubbed charcoal on the back and did a transfer of the line art and then painted it traditionally.
Now, Sam, I've noticed that if I'm not misunderstanding this, the cat has moved from sitting on top of the table, maybe, or am I wrong?
I don't know, maybe.
Was there always a cat in there, or did the cat sneak in at the last minute?
I don't know. I think I probably had a compositional problem and had to throw Arthur in. Arthur's my, but yeah, I don't know. I think he was moved. Okay.
All right. Good. So people can start asking questions and we'll read them. I'm sorry that Melanie Ream is going. She had left a nice comment. Don't tell all our secrets, she said. And then she wrote, Sam, so happy for all your well-deserved success. So that's good. I was going to ask you actually about teaching, because I left out of your bio that you teach. You said you were a mentor in the, is it the Minneapolis Fine School of Art?
Yeah. So right now I'm a mentor in the MFA program at Minneapolis College of Art and Design, MCAD.
Okay.
Yeah. And
what's that experience? What's it like being a teacher in being the knowledgeable person for a student?
I mean, I love it. And in fact, mentoring is, I think, is the part of teaching I like most. You know, when before I moved, I taught at Queens College in the undergraduate design department, and I taught design foundation and illustration too. And what I like about mentoring MFA students is they're just at a different point in their development as artists. They're much more independent. They come in with skills and a body of work. And so, you know, like I'm working with a student who's interested in doing picture books right now. And it's great. I think it, so far I've really enjoyed it and seen a project develop.
How long have you been doing that? You've been doing that for a couple of years, or?
So this is my first year as a mentor, and I taught last year there as well. And I, you know, was on a thesis committee for an MFA student last semester. semester, I think it was last year. The last like 6 months have felt like 7 years.
Right.
So, yeah, but I do enjoy teaching. I find I'm much better as a mentor. You know, I'm kind of having flashbacks right now to teaching via Zoom at the end of last semester, and that was, it's incredibly hard, I think, for everyone doing that right now. I can't even imagine doing that full time, but I like the hands-on work and kind of helping students realize their visions, as it were.
Thanks, Sam. You have a question here. I think it's good. How do you use social media to promote your work? How often do you post? Is it all of your work? Do you mix in personal pics? Do you interact a lot on there? It's a good question.
Yeah. So I don't post actually anything personal, really. Some people do, and it's like effortless. I think what happened was Instagram, like 4 or 5 years ago, was more fun in certain ways. I think now, it's people go on like with like a real like agenda and like a real focus. And for me, it is my primary way of promotion. And so I don't necessarily post all the time. I try to post at least once every couple weeks. I'm not someone who posts all the time. But I do post personal work intermixed with editorial work, or work that doesn't necessarily all look the same together. Because, I find people are interested, in seeing that and seeing what goes into it. And, and it's great. I get to interact with people. And, I've had like students reach out to me from, social media, and, I've gotten jobs from Instagram. So it is important. But I also, I try to be diligent at the same time. I think, like everyone else, I'm trying to find ways to be mindful about how I use social media, because it takes over your life very quickly, or, it can become a little bit mindless. So that's a weird push and pull right now, but I think I probably should be more diligent about posting regularly.
It's definitely can definitely be a time suck, as they say.
Yeah.
It was interesting in setting this up. I was kind of happy to hear you were sort of like, I don't really have a Facebook account. And I actually was happy about that. I was like, oh, yeah, good. Someone is not spending time on Facebook.
Yeah. I did for a long time, and then I had to end divorce from Facebook. Yeah.
It wasn't around 2016 or 2017, was it?
Yes. Had to end that bad relationship.
Oh, yeah, I understand. Those are most of my questions. Are there any more questions from the audience? It seems like not, but I'll sit here for another moment or two. So what are you working on something now? What are you working on? Let's talk about that.
I am. I'm working on a new book project. It's another like nonfiction picture book project about philosophy. And so I'm working on that, and there are, a couple other things. Right now, I'm actually trying to, as I was saying before, I'm painting more, and I'm, when I'm not working on sketches for this book project, and when I'm waiting to hear feedback, I'm trying to finish a small body of work. I've been definitely painting more this past year, since kind of lockdown, and the way life has slowed down quite a bit since March. So I'm working on that, and trying to, figure out if I'm going to expand my online store, get into that a little bit more, photographing artwork. So I'm staying busy.
Okay. unless people have more questions, I was just going to ask one more. Tell me about when Darwin Sailed the Sea.
Yeah.
How did, like, and it was the previous one as well. And When We Walked on the Moon, how did you come to know the writer? How did that?
Yeah. So I've actually never communicated with David Long, the writer, and which is not uncommon with picture books. Is you're kept pretty separate. I feel like art directors are the intermediaries. But with When We Walked on the Moon, I got that book through my illustration agent, and you know, they were felt like my style would lend itself to nonfiction, and I was really thrilled to do a book about, you know, space. It's like very groovy. There's a lot of interesting imagery and technology, and and then the same publisher, they had a new book project with the same author that is sort of like a strange sequel or like sibling to it, and that was also a really fun project to kind of shift gears and draw lots of animals and, you know, different sorts of landscapes. Hi, Edgar.
He asked a question. What's your process for personal books? Do you write it first, draw the pictures first, or combo?
I think they kind of come together a little bit because I have to have some structure, I think, in place before I can start drawing. But everything's really rough. You know, I will just start brainstorming with like a pencil on paper, trying to come up with fragments, really. That's sometimes I'll even work on small scraps of paper and get working on specific paragraphs. And it's sort of like a cut up method. And then I'll start putting them together, create some very rough outline. And that might, you know, inspire a little drawing. But I think the writing needs to start the project. You know, a work of art might inspire an idea, but the skeleton, I think, kind of needs to happen from having at least some kind of rough outline.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there other questions? It's around the end of the hour. I think that's okay. Oh,
I have a question. If
sure.
I may. Okay. My question is whether you register your work.
You know, hi Daniel, good to see you. I do register.
Let me, by the way, applaud your success. I mean, with huge kudos.
Thank you. I do, and actually, I have notes from your class on intellectual property that I do reference, and I do register my work. I have to say, you know, I don't register everything that I necessarily post on Instagram right away, which I should. I think I need to get into a routine of it. But 2 days ago just got a form back from the copyright office. So
since you're teaching, I'm urging you to tell your students, please tell them from the beginning to start to get into the habit of it. Okay. I mean, I know I beat this drum far too hard, but it's necessary.
It is. It's very important.
It's very important. It's very important. And I had not realized so much of your background before. And having grown up in an entire house filled with mid-century furniture, I was deeply impressed. Seriously. No, it's kudos to you for the experience on that. But please tell your students, tell other students, tell all of the people here in the, you know, who are sitting in. Registration, very, very important.
Yeah. Registration.
Thank you very much. And keep on doing what you're doing because it looks great.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Okay.
I
Bye.
will impress upon students the importance of
Thank
that.
you, thank you, thank you. I'm tired of being a lone voice crying in the wilderness.
On the long term, Daniel, I'm sure someone will be very grateful for that advice.
It is worth vast sums of money. I will not get into this at the moment. We can talk about this another time if you.
Yeah, let's do that. Are there other questions before we move on? Okay. Sam, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to chat with you. And we had a kind of a small house, but that's okay. We can make this recording available to the MFA program and other places as well. So thanks, Sam, and thanks everyone else for coming. And thank you. Thanks, Linda, and have a great night. And everyone, please stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming.
Make us all envious.
Thank you.